To introduce our first speaker, Martin Cornwell, who has come to speak for us all the way from London.
Yeah.
From 2006 to 2010, he was the co-editor of the Leeds-based satirical news website and physical magazine, No Quarter, and he has since been published by Writers Billboard and Everyday Fiction, among others. And tonight he's going to be reading from his upcoming novel called The Seers. So please welcome Martin.
More applause.
Yeah, as Jim said, I'm going to read a short section from near the beginning of my novel, which is called The Seers. The book's set in London, in a kind of alternate reality. It's not, the world isn't massively different to the world we know now, it's quite recognisable, but it's just one where technology is a lot more advanced. And another thing about this society is that there's a new drug becoming popular in London called purgatory. Now, rightly or wrongly, people take drugs generally to feel very good, whereas in this world, people take purgatory in order to feel really, really bad. And one of the kind of tasks I set myself in writing the book was to sort of think about why anyone would do such a thing. So yeah, I'm going to read sort of two scenes from near the beginning, where two of the main characters are introduced for the first time. In the northwest of the city, in a flat above Belsize Park tube station, a woman pulled close to her living room shades. Her telly stream was on, tuned to the weekend's news, but the woman had far more personal affairs in mind. She shucked away the goose-down jacket she had worn to the coffee shop and sat down in her living room's armchair. She looked at the little bundle on her coffee table and tried to summon the courage to swallow it. Each dose of the drug came wrapped in a single cigarette paper. The woman tried not to think about what it would do to her, just get it over with. She put the pea-sized wrap on her tongue and chauffeured it down with the last of her coffee. In her nervousness, she almost gagged it back up again, but finally it went right down. On screen, the news anchor cheerfully passed to the weatherman. The woman sat in darkness in her chair, and over the course of 20 nervous minutes, she tore her cardboard cup down to confetti. The woman's name was Ali Kettner. The weather guy was summarising the last month's weather and outlining the schedule for the next month. He had the graphics to explain the whole thing. First, he brought up an image of the Atlantic dated the 24th of March, which had been 3 weeks previously. Slowly, a whirl of white unfurled out of the blank oceanic blue. This was a representation of the imported wet weather system forming. The on-screen date scrolled forward a fortnight. As it did so, the white part of the graphic stretched further and further east across the blue, extending benignly like a brontosaurus's neck, till it was close enough to nibble at the green toes of the southwest UK. The weather guy paused the image then, and with a northerly thinning and sweeping gesture, described what the weather front would likely have done next if it had been left to its own devices. The little remote control thing that broadcast meteorologists use was visible in his hand as he did this. He seemed to be suggesting that the storm would normally have turned upwards and run a couple of 100 miles up into Norway. But then he started up the graphic once more, and the excitement in his face showed that what happened next was far more interesting and significant than that. The news anchor chimed in with some sort of comment that made the weather guy laugh. Whatever he had said, it didn't register with Ali. Feeling suddenly flushed, she took off her baggy old jumper and ventilated herself with a few tugs at her t-shirt's collar. On screen, the brontosaurus's neck started to curl in on itself, until its fundamental shape was no longer a stretched rectangle, but something egg-like. And that oval of bad weather was now covering much of Wales and southern England. The on-screen date progressed, ticking off the days, and as it did so, the oval expanded and morphed again till it covered the whole of the UK, with a little extra satellite of cloud breaking off to hide Northern Ireland. Then the oval just stopped moving. The hours and days kept rolling by in the bottom left of the display, but the wet weather graphic was constant. The date graphic passed through another half week until the counter reached the present day, when it finally stopped. The weather front hadn't moved one pixel in all that time. The white egg shape lay over the country as flush as a tablecloth. This was how it had come to be raining non-stop for nearly a month, said the weather guy's body language, as he threw back to the anchor, who had by now been joined at his desk by an economist, who no doubt wanted to discuss the pros and cons of the UK accepting Scandinavian capital in exchange for taking on their bad weather for another 6 weeks or so. Ali hopped up suddenly and checked the heating was definitely off. She had started sweating, she noticed. Whether this was through the drug beginning to take effect or her nervousness about the drug's predicted effects, she didn't know. Her hair hung lank and stringy. When it was clean, it was so blonde and so curly that people told her it looked like pasta. Then her breathing moved in very short order to flat-out hyperventilation. She was panicking. Was it still just nerves, or was this it, the thing, the drugs? She stood up and sat down. She stood up again. The Economist was very positive about the UK's financial future. Ali had never known she could sweat like this. She went to the kitchen and drank 2 glasses of water, one after the other. She felt like she'd just stepped off a treadmill. She was breathing so fast now that she was getting dizzy. Lurching back towards the armchair, she banged her shin on the coffee table, but she was too full of adrenaline to feel any pain. Sitting, she clutched her knees and puffed like a woman about to give birth. Her vision was blurring, but she kept breathing. And then all of a sudden, the news people seemed to leer right out of the screen and be in the room with her, just sitting over there by the window, yakking about the weather. And Ali hyperventilated her way into the revelation that real-life fear was inseparable from the fear the drug would induce. They were the same thing, and that meant that this definitely now was and always had been it. She gasped as her thoughts went off a cliff and down into some uncharted horror. She literally slid from the armchair. The Economist and news anchor, rudely ignoring the suffering woman at their feet, were wrapping up now. Prone on the floor, Ali moaned in an orgasm of psychic terror. Bits of coffee cup confetti fell and stuck to her wet face. The woman's eyes rolled up into her head, and the last thing she heard before the blackness dawned was the news anchor's reassuring voice, wishing her a very fine weekend indeed. It had put an extra 0 on the property's price, but the flooring of Ali's flat had been modified so that you couldn't hear a peep from the tube station below. Humans were emerging out of the station now, dilating umbrellas or shouldering their jackets up over their heads against the 0820 to 0900 shower, which was 10 minutes old. One of those recently surfaced commuters headed away from the station with the same anxiety as the umbrella-less people currently rushing towards bus shelters and shop doorways, even though she was better prepared. This woman's name was Jazz Kelsey. She worked in a pharmacy tacked onto the south side of the Royal Free Hospital, a quarter of a mile uphill from the station. Jazz was by no means late for work, because she was never late for anything. She was hurrying because she had a secret and high-risk extra task to attend to, and an unexpectedly short window in which to do it. Her husband Paul didn't work weekends, yet typically the fucker had chosen this one to be up and about early. Jazz had had her hand on the doorknob when she had heard him loafing through the flat and calling out that he decided to make sure she had a proper breakfast for once. And Jazz had had to go back to the kitchen and spend 10 knee-jiggling minutes at the table, chewing toast whose flavour was utterly fogged by adrenaline, before she could legitimately tell Paul that that was a lovely thing to do, and she wished she didn't have to go so soon, but she'd be back in a few hours. Then she had thrown her raincoat back on, slammed the door and headed down the street, straightening the coat's poorly tucked collar as she went. Any Londoner will tell you it's annoying to have to wait more than 3 minutes for the next tube. Even so, Jazz didn't have to give the poor platform attendant such a hard time about it. Jazz swiped her way into the pharmacy at 08:34. It was okay, she had made it in good time after all. The only other pressing danger was Leonard, her supervisee, who would be there soon. But that was okay too. She still had a good 15 minutes before he was likely to arrive. She shivered the wetness out from the umbrella's skin, closed it and put it by the door. She didn't put on the lights. In the dark she found the service counter and moved her fingers across it in a security-coded pattern. A moment later a circular screen appeared on the counter's long, flat surface and automatically adjusted its picture to exactly the most comfortable position for Jazz's viewing. Jazz scrolled through its pages, looking for the camera settings. Finding them, she disabled the dispensing area's CCTV. It was now 08:36. She had maybe 10, 12 minutes. Jazz took 2 consecutive breaths for the first time since she had swiped in. She turned on the store's lights, flipped up the service counter's end panel, and passed through to where the medicinal stock was kept. The thing that made the whole exercise a lot easier for Jazz was that it didn't have to be any particular kind of antidepressant. She could more or less pick and mix from the brands available, or more accurately, just heave random packets out of the cabinet and into her handbag. At 08:44, Jazz reactivated the old cameras. All 5 rose on their necks in unison in that altogether humanoid way that was unsettling to Jazz at the best of times, and recommenced filming. The camera's first frames showed Jazz returning to upright from under the counter, from where she had bent to store her handbag. The cameras, each programmed to focus on the agent of any motion within their territory, watched as a cat watches. The one above Jazz seemed to be alert to the tiniest movements and adjusted its position accordingly. Jazz heard the thing's tiny whirring as it cocked and queried, striving to understand the way Jazz flattened out her skirt, tucked a claw of hair behind her ear, and pretended to busy herself with the countertop screen. But the camera couldn't understand what was going on, Jazz reassured herself, any more than a cat could. Less so, in fact. The camera could only perceive, and it had perceived nothing.